Jean Shaheen is a Democratic senator and a senior member of both the Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committees. She just completed a visit to the Balkans, at risk there because of Russia's war in Ukraine, and is now here in London for talks in this NATO ally hub. And she joins me here on the set.
Nice to be with you.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So there you see the result of American and NATO support for your Ukrainian allies. It's also very risky now and high stakes. What are you thinking as you sit here? You've just come back from close to that region.
Well, it goes to show why this allied partnership with the West and NATO in support of Ukraine is so important, because the supplies, the support we're giving Ukraine has allowed them to take back Liman, which is an important transportation hub. The Russians were planning to use it as a logistics operation to supply Donetsk and Luhansk. So this has been an important victory for Ukraine, but as the report pointed out, there's a lot more that has to be done.
There's a lot more that has to be done to gain back the territory if they want to push Russia out. But how much more will the US and NATO tolerate beyond or before they think that it might spook Putin into doing something really inadmissible? Are you worried about that?
Well, I think we're all worried about what Putin might do because he's acting irrationally. Going into Ukraine in that unprovoked war, thinking that he was going to take over the country just for his own expansionist dreams, I think was irrational. But that's all the more reason why it's very important for the West to stay united in supporting Ukraine. I had an opportunity to meet with 4 women Ukrainian soldiers last week. And one of the things one young woman sergeant told me, and she'd been fighting in the eastern region of Ukraine really for years now. And she told me, you need to give us the weapons so that we can fight so that you don't have to. And I think it's important, and I talk to my constituents, and we in the Senate believe that it's important for us to continue to keep our support for Ukraine, to partner very closely with our allies, and the partnership we have with the United Kingdom has been very important in that. The partnership with NATO has been very important to ensure that we can help the Ukrainians defeat the Russians and hold Putin accountable.
Okay, so you're a politician. You've just mentioned your constituents. Many political leaders are in a bind right now because they're saying, how much more of this can we inflict on our people? Inflation, food poverty, energy, soaring energy prices because of what Putin's doing. But you have come back believing that the alliance can stay together, as they say, for as long as it has to push Putin back?
I do, and I think it's important that we are able to do that. You know, what history tells us is that if we don't stop this bully, this authoritarian dictator now, that he has other designs beyond Ukraine. I was just in Bosnia, in the Western Balkans, and you can see the evidence of Russia's disinformation in the Balkans, of their meddling, of their trying to separate the Republic of Srpska, part of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and they will continue to do that.
So they're trying to fragment that area that's been sort of stuck together since the Dayton Peace Accords after the war.
Absolutely, and it's not just there. They're also active in Serbia. They're in Croatia now. We know that the Baltic states are concerned about Russian intervention. So it's in Albania, what we heard was that they're concerned about what's happening. So it's something that we need to work on now because it's in our allied interest to do that. It's in the United States' national security interest.
Well, I mean, it was the US, wasn't it, back in 1995 that led a NATO mission to get rid of the genocidal forces of Serbia and the Bosnian Serbs, and then onward into Kosovo. And the US, has recognized Kosovo as independent. I spoke to the Prime Minister of Kosovo, and I know you were next door in Albania, but he said this to me, Albin Kurti, said that he was very concerned about about the Serbian government in Belgrade and about Russia, through its Serbian proxies, again, seeking to destabilize the region, including Kosovo. This is what he said.
If it wouldn't have been for the support from Belgrade, I think that Serbs in Bosnia, Serbs in Montenegro, Serbs in Kosovo, they would all integrate in respective countries. But it is Belgrade who pays people in all these countries in order to sabotage functionality of the state, to disobey to the rule of law, and so on and so forth.
Did you get that impression when you were there, that if it wasn't for that kind of meddling, there would be, a much more cohesive democratic process there?
Well, obviously, there's a long history of ethnic tensions in the region, but having Russia there to exploit those tensions makes it much harder to get things done. And we saw with President Vučić at the UN, well, when he was at the UN, coming to this agreement with Lavrov's Foreign Secretary, Russian Secretary Lavrov, on U.S. soil. That was not designed to encourage agreement among the countries in the Western Balkans.
It's pretty scary, but now with this saber rattling, I mean, really people are beginning to wake up and think many of this generation weren't even aware of what happened in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and thought that with the end of the Cold War, this was a thing of the past. But it's so real now. This is what the national security spokesman, John Kirby, said about the idea that Russia would be defending its territory in Ukraine. This is what he said about the annexed territories.
It's not an attack on Russia. It is Ukrainian soil. It was Ukrainian soil. It is today, and it will be tomorrow. And we're not in the business of telling President Zelensky how he goes about conducting military operations. What we are doing is making sure he has the capabilities and the systems that he needs to do that effectively, and he is.
Okay, I'm going to get to he is in a second. I want to know what you think about the threat level. Where is it now in terms of the possibility of tactical nukes or an attack, a conventional attack on a NATO, arms depot or anything like that?
Well, we know that Vladimir Putin is suffering losses, that he doesn't have a lot of options now. And so I think it's very concerning, his rhetoric and his long-standing policy of Russia to consider escalating to de-escalate is this policy that they talk about, and their tactical nukes that they say they're willing to use, which is all the more reason why we need to stay united. We need to be very clear with Vladimir Putin that there are consequences for the kind of action he's talking about. An attack on a NATO country, I think President Biden has been very clear, and the NATO countries have been clear. An attack on a NATO country is an attack on all of us. And I don't think at this point it's in Putin's interest or Russia's interest to attack NATO.
What would it look like? What are catastrophic consequences for Russia if this happens? As the National Security Advisor said over the weekend, Jake Sullivan, the former CIA director, former CENTCOM commander, David Petraeus, suggested that NATO, with conventional warfare, would sink every ship in Russia's Black Sea Fleet, would attack and eliminate Russian troop concentrations in Ukraine. What does it look like, a response from NATO?
Well, I think all of those are the kinds of potential responses and options that the United States and NATO has for an attack. And I think leaving those to Putin's imagination may be important, because I think we want to lay out for him what our options are, but we're not going to tell him exactly how we're going to respond.